Hi, everyone. Well, welcome to the next in the webinar series at connectedlearning.tv. We're really pleased today to have a great group in our Google Hangout and to be featuring Mike Hawkins, who mostly goes by Brother Mike. And Mike is the lead mentor at Digital Youth Network and at YOUmedia Chicago, which is a learning lab that was founded a couple years ago in the main downtown library, the Harold Washington Library in downtown Chicago, which is a center that's really dedicated to serving young people and their pursuit of interest in the digital arts. And Brother Mike's own specialty is as a poet, spoken word, and hip hop artist, and as an inspiration for so much of the work that we've been doing in youth serving programs. We are happy to be welcoming also everybody who's joining on the live stream. So we encourage you to post comments as well as questions that as moderator I will be trying to pull in from the live stream and bring into the Google Hangout as best we can. So before I hand it over to Brother Mike to frame up some of the topics that we'll be discussing today, I wanted to invite the other participants in the Hangout to introduce themselves and talk a little bit about their work and how it's intersecting to the topics we'll be covering today. Monica, would you like to start?
Sure. I'm in Loveland, Colorado, and the last 4 years have been working on a quiet revolution to redefine school, pretty much led by youth. Um, our intrigue with the YOUmedia is part of the plan is that the city would become, or the community would become the curriculum, much like a university campus in the high school buildings. When we first found out about the media centers, they were like, that's what the high school buildings could become. So
Great, thanks, Monica. Thomas?
Hi, yeah, I am in rural mid-coast Maine, and similarly, over the last 4 years, I've been working on projects that bridge networked learning in online spaces with networked learning in face-to-face contexts. And so working mostly on a rural innovation or learning lab here in Maine, and then sharing a network and collaborating with individuals like Monica, working to empower young people to have spaces of learning that are outside of traditional schools.
Great, thanks, Thomas. Hillary?
Hi, I'm Hillary Kolos. I'm the director of digital learning at DreamYard, and we are an arts education nonprofit in the Bronx, and we're also a YOUmedia early adopter site. So we, in addition to the programs we already have, which are at our art center and also in with our school partners here in the Bronx, and a high school that we partner with, the Department of Education. We'll be opening up an expanded YOUmedia center here in Morrisania and the Bronx and offer similar programs to the ones Brother Mike will be talking about.
Great, thanks, Hillary. It's great to have you all here. So I'll hand it over to Brother Mike now. Take it away.
Yeah. Hello, everybody. Yeah, my name's Brother Mike. I'm the lead mentor and coordinator at YOUmedia Chicago at the Harold Washington Library Center. I come here today to really talk about, a journey, if you will, a journey of connecting students to various pathways based on somewhat my own interest, but also recognizing and understanding their interest. I'm going to share a few slides with you in a second, but just wanted to kind of get you up to speed about kind of my background and then where we're going to be moving towards. Again, like Mimi said, I'm a poet. I came to DYN maybe about 5 or 6 years ago now. in DYN Digital Youth Network. Uh, and I came in pretty much as, in this new digital media program as the poet. And everybody was like, well, why do we have a poet? Uh, and my contention was that, writing is at the center and at the core of all media, and that everything springs from that, and that we can make connections uh, to all the programming uh, through that lens. Uh, so for me, it was, really, really interesting and cool to be able to connect with, the video mentor right next door and create digital choreo poems, or move that into the studio and have kids create their own CDs. So in that informal, after school space, just finding ways where, we could build on what kids were already doing, uh, and connect them to new creative experiences where, their interest is at the center. Uh, and then really, how do we bring that not only into the after school space, but how do we begin to, make that real inside the school day? One of the first projects I ended up working on in terms of, bringing that bridge from the after school to the in school was a record label project. And at that, critical thinking was kind of at the center. We had students that were, absorbing all this media, especially, hip hop at the time, and a lot of these messages that they were receiving, visually and contextually, were negative. We sought to kind of shake that up and remix the system, if you will, that students could find their voice, that they could showcase their true identity, and be guided, you know, uh, by mentors who had a shared purpose, if you will, to see this shift, to see students who could, really, you know, own the media that, you know, that they were a part of, that they didn't just have to be consumers, but they could be producers of media. Um, so so that kind of has really been a centerpiece of the YOUmedia work, and then also like how we bring mentors into the fold, like our interest, being at the center and helping students see themselves at the center of their own learning. As a mentor, like I could have just been a specialist and just stayed in my lane, so to speak. But for me, it was really about being able to go outside of that, to be able to learn this media that the students were learning, to empower them as teachers as well. But also, I think what's really important about that time period, that early time period of DYN, was, you know, folks like Dr. Pinkard really recognizing that she had a staff of artists who wanted to learn to be teachers, who wanted to shake up the current system, uh, to help students navigate, but also help us understand how to support our students in the way they need to be supported. Uh, so we went through a series of intense uh, professional development sessions where uh, we learned pedagogy, we learned how to develop units, we learned how to create lessons with outcomes. Uh, and for most of us, I mean, I'll just speak for me, I would, prior to DYN, I would come to, different schools and things like that, and it would only be about my performance or me showcasing my work. It wasn't about student outcomes, so to speak, or getting them to write. Uh, but in this space, this new context, uh, that was very much real and at the center. That we were, not just up there showcasing, but we are leading students through a process that where they could be, quote unquote, critical creators, that they can make the shifts and connections if they have the tools. And the tools are, the access to the media, uh, the access to, computers or creative pieces like that, um, and mentors. I think we always talk about this idea of empowerment, empowering students, but I think you can only empower students if you empower the adults around them. So just a little background of kind of pre-YOUmedia. And let me pull up some slides here real quick. All right. Okay. So this is can everybody see my screen?
Yep, it looks good.
Okay. Uh, just so this is the fun place I get to work at every day. This is YOUmedia Chicago. Uh, we have been open maybe about 3 years, 3 years now. And what was interesting about this space, or even more so the birth of this space, Connie Yao from MacArthur would come into Digital Youth Network and be like, "What do you guys think about coming to the library?" And initially, I was kind of like, "No, I don't think that's I don't think that's cool." Uh, but she was like, "Trust me, I think it's a good idea." Uh, and over time, she would just keep, bringing that up. Like, what do you guys think about the library? Uh, and then finally, one day we were like, well, it might be cool. Let's try it out. And then basically, we found ourselves with a copy of the house on Mango Street, and bringing mentors down to the Harold Washington Library Center. This room that you see is, YOUmedia in its current state. But when we started, we were basically in a conference room with the house on Mango Street, a laptop cart, and the mentors. Uh, and what's beautiful about that experience was that using this anchor text, house on Mango Street, having, mentors, offer everything from graphic design to video to spoken word uh, to graphic design, and having students create a number of projects out of that. They created PSAs, they, created, podcasts, uh, poetry. They did a whole bunch of stuff around this one book, and it kind of just opened up our eyes like, man, if we can get kids from, all parts of the city to come down to a conference room, read the house on Mango Street, and create these amazing products, uh, and then be able to showcase that to the author, I think this YOUmedia thing could work. uh, and and it was really exciting, just as a mentor coming from a school setting, that you could use that book to really redefine what how we can engage students around text that they might otherwise not read, or maybe just do a paper on, that we can really open up the curriculum in a whole new way if you have mentors engaged, but you also have exciting ways to showcase students' work. Uh, and one of the ways that we do this is uh, not only in the physical space, but connecting students, interest and ideas through social networks as well. Uh, Obviously, some of the more traditional ones like your Facebook or your Twitter, but we also have our own social learning network where students can connect with one another, connect with mentors, and really build around iteration and uh, creative projects. And as a mentor, it's really important to me uh, and everybody on our staff that you know there's again this shared purpose to really uh, get kids to get out of this mind state of just being consumers of media, that they have the power uh, to really engage in a whole new way. They just don't have to be, passive spectators. They can be aggressively engaged. If we, create experiences for them or opportunities uh, to showcase their work and their talents, or bring those out of them. I think again that's a key part of mentorship, to recognize in a student, where they can go. Uh, they come in a lot of times, wanting to be like the next Jay-Z or whatever, but they don't understand the 40 or 50 people, that are around, helping support that artist. Uh, so we try to again open those worlds and opportunities to students through workshops where they can build their skills. Uh, or through various opportunities where they can connect uh, outside of just the workshop space. So we try to really create like partnerships and uh, really seek ways in which we can connect students to industry professionals. I mean, or professional opportunities. Some of those are, just recently we had a group of kids, this beautiful group right here, uh, did a project with Lady Gaga, where they were, selected, uh, by mentors and librarians on staff to help create or design a tour bus, kind of like a mobile YOUmedia, if you will. Uh, and just to be able to connect kids to opportunities that they wouldn't necessarily have, uh, I think is a beautiful thing. But what I noticed about this group is they you know connected. A lot of half these kids are homeschooled, the other half are public. uh, and what was interesting there was that they wouldn't have these opportunities to connect outside of the library, but also that most of these kids, were kind of, self-prescribed introverts. Uh, and to see them not only come together and create an amazing, product, but also come together as people to make those connections, uh, not only to a superstar, but to themselves, and to see themselves as, uh, important in the process, and that they were changed, that they could see some of the things that they did in terms of creating the bus, or just working together or working with clients, uh, that I think were, you know, really brought them some life skills. A lot of them talked about how they're better public speakers, that they feel more confident in their creations, that they, not only created for the Born Brave bus, but they felt brave themselves. Uh, and those are, the type of experiences, I I think are at the core uh, of what this whole connected learning movement is about. That it is indeed, you know, a movement uh, that is an intentional piece. It's not just kind of, you're not blended, you're not just kind of bumping into each other. Uh, that we want to see, you know, kids, you know, have opportunities to connect with each other, that they have safe spaces to do that in, that there's full engagement and participation by not only the students, but the mentors and the institutions, uh, and that we can build, you know, a stronger community uh, that's engaged, that's creative, and, you know, will hopefully, you know, shake up, shift, and change our world. So I will leave you with my geeking out. Ode to Mimi.
Great. Thanks, Brother Mike. It's always fantastic to see the pictures of the space and the kids that you're involved in. I wanted to invite the participants in the Hangout to raise any questions or comments based on Brother Mike's presentation.
Hey, this is
I have a
Thomas.
question, Hillary.
Oh,
Um, Sorry, Thomas. My question is just, you talked a lot about running workshops and special projects, but Brother Mike, I'd love to hear more about the importance of mentors during the hangout time. So when it's more informal, unstructured time, kids are just coming in from school. What's the role of a mentor during those times?
Well, I think the hangout time is really, really key for mentors to get to know students. Uh, you know, when before workshops happen, you know, most of the kids just kind of come to the space and they just chill out. That might mean read a book. They might, you know, grab something to eat. They might, you know, start a rap cipher. Uh, and for me, that's prime opportunity to, you know, just kind of talk to them. Uh, you know, personally, like if there's like a rap cipher going on, I'll jump in and rap with them. Uh, and by no means am I the best rapper, they'll tell you. But, you know, I think it's those points where you can kind of engage in what they're engaged in. Uh, if they're talking about, you know, a certain issue in society, that, you know, you can come in and be like, hey, I know about that too. I got an opinion. Uh, and it's at that point, those points where you can really see uh, where students are in the day or what they're connecting with, uh, and that in that they can connect with you too. I think, you know, for us, it's not about just teaching workshops. In fact, our kind of framework for what defines a good mentor uh, is that they have, you know, social or cultural capital, that they're able to connect with the student in a certain way. And I think you see a lot of that happen in the hangout time. Uh, there's, you know, a tech skill that they have, you know, some type of specialty. Uh, so again, you can introduce a student to your specialty, or, you know, that's a time where, again, they can connect with you about their specialty. Uh, Another frame for the mentorship is Web 2.0 skills, that they're able to, you know, kind of navigate the Facebooks, Twitters, Instagram, uh, and then that they have pedagogical knowledge, that, you know, they can, you know, execute, you know, units, lessons, you know, workshops or projects. But again, I think that discovery point for the mentor is, you know, in that hangout space, that they're not just kind of observing, but in some cases, you know, participating in it as well. I mean, students will tell you to back off, like, I'm busy, I'm chilling, or whatever. But it's important to let them have that space too, right? Yeah, so I think that hangout space is such a key kind of connection point to me. Uh, and also the messing around. I mean, the kids don't necessarily define those areas. They're not going to say I'm in the messing around space, but you can tell when they're messing around with a different tool or a skill or something like that, or playing with an interest. Uh, and I think those are the 2 points I think are key in terms of like if we're looking at hanging out, messing around, and geeking out. The hanging out and the messing around are the absolute key points in terms of making those connections to students.
Thanks, Brother Mike. I do feel like that space for just hanging out in an interest-driven context really is one of the things that makes YOUmedia unique from a lot of in the range of youth-serving media programs. Thomas, did you have a question that you wanted to jump in on?
I do, Mimi, but the question that came in from Craig, I don't know if that evolution question might lead into the what's next questions that I posed. What do you think?
Sure. This is a question from Livestream from Craig Watkins. Hi, Brother Mike. How has the vision of YOUmedia evolved over the last 3 years? What do you see as the next phase of development?
Uh, that's a great question. Hey, Craig. Well, I think at first it was just about year one was really about getting students engaged. I think it was, and also getting mentors engaged. We were really figuring out what this partnership looked like. I mean, we were two organizations coming together, the library and Digital Youth Network. So it was, how do we foster our relationships and create a flow, if you will, that at first it was just mentors from Digital Youth Network who were teaching the workshops. But we found that our librarians and our cyber navigators had a wealth of talent and knowledge that they were bringing to the table. Why couldn't they engage in that space too? So that first year was really about, understanding how we could come together as two staffs to create this YOUmedia space, this YOUmedia culture, if you will. And I think we strived from, making some mistakes. We say, hey, kids are just going to jump in and they're going to just take our great workshops. Did not happen. That first year was, 6 months before we really got kids, moving from the messing around, the hanging out and the messing around to a geeking out space. You would have the one or two kids that were, just super interest driven that would come to the workshops. So they were our seeds, but en masse, just wasn't happening. And then, I think it was critical turning point for me in year one was we had a lot of kids that were coming in as gamers. All they would do is, just play the games and then they would leave. But Taylor, who was our lead librarian, started to notice that there were these robust conversations going on at the gaming couch. And she's a heavy gamer herself. That's not my strongest point. So she had this cultural capital with the students that I didn't have, and was able to really draw something out of that. So out of those conversations with the gamers, she said, hey, all you guys have blogs. You're always talking about games. Why don't we come together and create one blog, like a super group, if you will? So out of that, this library games group was born. We hadn't planned that, Taylor was going to teach workshops. Students hadn't planned to have a gaming podcast. That was nowhere on our radar. But what I thought was interesting about that year one piece was that, students were able to create programming basically, and we were able to shape that with uh, help and support Taylor as a librarian to move into this kind of actually executing pedagogy, right? That she was now creating units around this interest that the kids had, and that we had to, really connect with that, or uh, just have students just hang out and mess around. And I think we want students to go deeper. Uh, so out of that first year again was really, I think, again, a good testing ground. Some things really worked. Our One Book One Chicago program, uh, which I talked about earlier with the House on Mango Street, that became a signature project immediately. Uh, Taylor's Library Games, that became kind of a signature project. Year two, it was like, well, how do we build on this momentum that we have? Uh, Kids are, starting to show very specific interest in things. How do we help build programming around that? Uh, so that's a lot of what we did that second year as mentors, just really putting our heads together, talking about, what we were seeing, not only from what kids were checking out at the desk, but what they were talking about, what we were seeing in the social network. And, out of that, came a lot of these, what will become, our signature project series. One of those, that came year two was uh, really about showcasing students' work better. So uh, we had this program called I Remix Spoken Word, and the students were like, can we have a space to showcase our work? I wasn't sure if you could do an open mic in the library. I was like, I don't know if we can do that, but they were like, well, let's try it. So kind of let them run with it, and they only had like 25 kids that first showing, but they took pictures, they put it on Facebook. Then the next week they did it, there was 100 kids there. So it was like, for me, that opened up a whole new door to say, like, you know, if you build on the kids' interest, uh, and they can actively take ownership and share that with their friends, their peer groups, uh, that those peers are going to want to know where they're at and where this is happening. And they're going to come to that space. So it was really about, that second year helping kids, showcase work out, uh, and really building, partnerships where they can do that. One of those, a lot of our graphic design kids, for example, and photographers, I just saw this kind of robust, you know, onslaught of work popping up in our social network. And I was like, well, we really don't have a showcase space for our graphic design or photographers. I mean, beyond just putting their stuff up on the wall. Uh, so I reached out to, the Museum of Contemporary Art, uh, and we created a project around uh, their resident artist, Mark Bradford. Uh, and it was great because it gave students a chance to not only create something that would be showcased at YOUmedia, but it also would be showcased at the MCA potentially, and they got to work with, in that sense, a client, or a client, if you will, Mark Bradford, and be able to respond and create to his work. Uh, So a lot of our programs really mimic that kind of client relationship piece uh, that second year. So it was interesting to see like how much kids were really starting to engage in the project-based space. Uh, and then our third year really was really about getting the whole staff on board as uh, a collective and holistic kind of shared purpose, if you will, uh, that we could all support students in the way of mentorship, be that learning opportunities or just connecting with them as people. Uh, honoring the best in our young people.
Thanks, Brother Mike. It's great to hear how it's been evolving over the years. I think one of the great features of the YOUmedia space that you're in is just this openness to ongoing experimentation and learning internal to the space too. I think there's a couple of questions that relate to how, if any, how or what are the mechanisms through which you're thinking about tying that interest-driven learning, this is from Howard Rheingold, in the hangout environment and that more informal environment of YOUmedia to the traditional classroom curriculum. And I think, Thomas, if you want to raise your question, it's sort of in a related note, I think.
Yeah, sure. And I think hello to Howard as well. Has a lot of experience uh, thinking and also practicing. What I'm going to try to get at here, but is that if the YOUmedia project becomes a catalyst for taking learning into the connected realm outside of the school, and you mentioned earlier about making the context of the project be more during the school day versus an after school project. What what do you see as far as motion towards receiving credit for what these young people are doing, or maybe even creating landscapes of learning that could be acknowledged as more to formal institutions as a official learning in some way, and then I'll save my other question for that. But essentially, taking the lab and having it be a catalyst for all the things that connected learning is really about.
Well, I think I think one way that there's two ways I think we try to do that. I think one example to me is the One Book One Chicago program. Again, like taking what we think of as a traditional text, a book, and then having students be able to create around that book. One example was we did the House on or A Mercy by Toni Morrison. Now, by all, a lot of standards for youth, it's a hard sell to get them to read Toni Morrison, right? It might be a hard sell for some adults. But, I felt the text, was super important, and I engaged in it, and wanted them to engage in it. So we took that book, and I had my spoken word students in this instance really commit to reading it with me, that we can do this together. And then for me, it was really important to connect it to what was going on in pop culture. So around the time they were reading it, there was this great dialogue, and probably to some extent still is this dialogue around post-racial America. What A Mercy really spoke to was, pre-raced America, which for me, it was kind of like, wow, I hadn't thought about America in that context, or what kind of people we could be if we, had a common interest, and race and all these divisions weren't separating us. So out of this book, this one text, we're having critical conversations that could easily be connected to social studies. We're having, deep and critical conversations about character and theme. These things, plug right into literacy, right? And then the art of performing these things. So how do we take, this poem that we've created, and create a poster around it? So really garnering all these types of learning around this one text, I think, for me, that's one way to kind of shake it up for the students, to say that, yes, we want you to reflect through a paper. I still think writing. I don't ever want to get away from the core. Uh, but I think for students, how can what I do, what I'm interested in, be valued in this context? Uh, if I'm a poet, maybe that's not valued in school. Or if I'm a rapper, if I can rap, you know, what this book means and what the story is telling, how is that different than a paper, right? You still have to showcase your understanding of the narrative or the text, right? Uh, and I think on the flip side of that, we've been working closely with Chicago Humanities Festival and bringing teachers in uh, and having them go through the same process to show that they can do it. And then if they can do it, they're going to become champions of it within their institutions, within their communities, with their own kids, right? Uh, and it was funny, like this past Friday, we had, teachers remixing Fight Club and The Scarlet Letter. Had some very interesting pieces come out of that. But again, if we can show the teachers can do it, and we can show students that there's new ways that they can learn and showcase what's valuable, uh, I think they'll find a real stake and want to engage more in the learning process.
I have a kind of a provocative comment, if I may. You made a comment there, you don't ever want to get away from the core. And so rather than having you address it, unless you want to, please jump right in. I'm wondering if we can't be just curious enough to see what happens if we do get away from the core and we trust in the curiosity enough. I mean, if kids are exposed in these spaces, these YOUmedia spaces and other spaces like that to teachers who are messing around and geeking out, can't we trust that the curiosity from within is going to do us much better than the core? So I kind of like to push that a little bit.
Well, I guess when the core for me is your writing. I think I'm not really talking about that. The core standards. For me, poetry rests at the core of all things. So I probably should have explained that a little bit. But I believe writing and expressing is at the core of so much that we do. And has influenced my practice as an artist, and I try to bring that to the students too. That and actually, for me, three important principles kind of reign true for a mentor, and how I want my mentees or my students to connect. That anything that they do has a sense of identity, has a sense of purpose, and then there's a method in which they execute it. Those three tenets to me, really are at the core of my poetry, at the core of myself as a mentor or as an educator. And I want students to see those pieces, that they can see themselves, they can find identity in text, they can find identity in media, even if they have to create it. And a lot of times they have to create it to find their true selves. That there's a purpose in what they do, that they're not just copying what they're seeing. That that purpose can be connected and shared. Like if for example, like we look at some of the crazy images that we see in rap and film sometimes. Uh, you know, Sometimes I'm like, where's the purpose? Uh, and I think you know what I try to help students understand is that they can recreate the purpose, that they can repurpose their experience as consumers by being critical, uh, creators, and that they do that with various methods. I want these kids to be Renaissance artists. Uh, and I want to help, create a shift in terms of how we educate kids. You know, I don't think the current system works. But for what it's worth, I think when we talked about, or when we talk about connected community, we can't do anything as mentors in spaces like YOUmedia if we don't have driven teachers, if we don't have driven parents. And I think I see us as a directly connected line uh, that I can only support these students because they're supported in these other spaces. And yeah, there's struggles in schools, but there's struggles in after school spaces. But I think for me it's about recognizing both of those pieces, and seeing how we can support each other to create a greater learning community uh, in all of our spaces.
Thanks for that. I think those clarifying connections between Monica and Brother Mike, that was super helpful. We're starting to inch a little bit closer to the top of the hour, so I wanted to invite Hillary and Thomas and Monica to speak a little bit to maybe how their work intersects with some of the work that Brother Mike is doing at YOUmedia. I find what's really interesting about the YOUmedia innovation is both how it's incredibly unique to the context and the specific digital arts that are supported there, but also how it's becoming a kind of a beacon of innovation for a certain community that's highly distributed in a wide range of locations. And I think we have the great benefit of having in our hangout a group of people who represent institutional and regional diversity, but who are also part of the community and the conversation around the YOUmedia Learning Labs, and really extending that conversation and innovation space. So I don't know if one of you want to jump in. Hillary, maybe speaking a bit about the DreamYards experience.
Sure. So DreamYard, we haven't officially opened our YOUmedia expansion yet, so it's a little bit theoretical. But I will say what's different is we're not a library. We're going to be housed in an art center that's based in the community of Morrisania in the South Bronx. So we're much more nestled sort of on a slower street. We're not in downtown Chicago. We're in an outer borough, not on a main train line, but we are surrounded by many families and young people and schools. So we're trying to figure out how that setting is different, and how that'll affect our YOUmedia. So what that means for us, I think, is one thing is that we don't have the heavy foot traffic that you have at Harold Washington. So we already have existing programs here that are really strong and really amazing in poetry, visual arts, arts and activism, and theater. And we're trying to figure out, one, how to integrate digital media. They already do some work with digital media, but how to integrate digital media more there, but also how to create new programs that have more of a digital focus. But the programs that already exist, we have to do a lot of recruiting that's just on the ground, getting out into schools. We can't rely too much on people just wanting to stop by. And so that's one difference, is just our physical location. Another is that as a library or a museum, they're often open to all at any hour, and that's not the model we've had for our art center. So we're trying to figure out how to have open hangout hours. Like usually we have young people registered for a program. So it'd be very different for us to have a open to all the time model. So we're trying to figure out what that looks like in our center, and what that means for mentoring as well. And then another thing that's a little different that we're going to figure out is that we are very much geared towards helping kids of all ages here. And I know that the space in Harold Washington is teen centered, and then in the branches in Chicago you have some middle school centered spaces. But we're one art center, and we're trying to figure out, right now we serve students in K through 12, and we're interested in serving whole families. So how do we create a space that's balanced between letting teens have the space that they want, but also really capitalizing on relationships that we already have, where teens are bringing their younger nephew or their little sister, and parents who want to hang out as well. How do we serve a whole family in this context? So deals with a lot of different parts of YOUmedia, but I can't necessarily say what that's going to look like for mentoring yet here, but they're all questions I have.
Yeah, we'll really look forward to see how things roll out in your space, Hillary. Thomas, did you want to jump in?
You know, Monica, do you want to speak, and then I'll touch base. Yeah.
Sure. I just want to throw out, I love all the YOUmedia stuff. Again, it resonated with us highly a few years back when we're thinking all we really need are resources. We need free spaces where we don't have to prove anything, and resources. Right now, everything costs so much within or without the school district. So what if we threw it all towards that? So to me, what it's really modeling, what you guys are modeling, is this rhizomatic learning, that you are mentoring alongside, and everyone's a learner, and we are facilitating curiosities from within, and the literacy, the communication piece. Are you able to have a passion and communicate that? Providing spaces where people can communicate in whatever method is suitable to them. So I did throw in the chat Dave Cormier's one of his latest videos on rhizomatic learning, where he talks about really all we're about is preparing for uncertainty, and that we need to stop measuring learning. So our goal in our little quiet revolution is that we would have more spaces like YOUmedia, and that would just be spaces for the whole community, and we would just call that school. So.
And I would piggyback on that quite a bit, and the projects that I'm involved with here in rural Maine really are focused at this point on providing those spaces where reskilling can happen, where young people can seek out mentors and learning that are not only relevant to them and their lives, but also the transition of their communities. And then how that will interface with the traditional school, whether that's pushing the school to connected learning, or making legitimate those motions that might seem radical now, or providing a replacement. And so I'm very inspired by what I've seen by the work that's been presented today.
Thanks, Tom and Monica. It's great to hear about all of this great work happening in different parts of the country. Brother Mike, I wanted to let you have the last word before we close here.
First, just want to thank you guys for joining the conversation and Mimi putting this together. I truly believe, connected learning is, the wave of our future. I think if we can truly put students at the center and empower the adults around them to connect them to creative experiences, critical thinking, a holistic community, if you will, where we see each other as more connected than disconnected. And I think that's represented in this group here. That we hopefully will see a shift in our society. And I think the kids, the students, I think they're ready for it. I think institutions are ready for it. And I hope that this continues to help push us to that place of creative change. So, and I can't leave without saying revolution.
Yeah, welcome to the revolution. That's right. Thank you, Brother Mike, Thomas Steele May, Hillary Colos, and Monica Hardy. We look forward to continuing the conversation.